Welcome to the Human Capital Innovations Podcast, your go-to source for personal, professional, and organizational growth and development. We hope you tune in often for all things people management, organizational development and change, organizational leadership, and social impact related. Maximize your personal and organizational potential with Human Capital Innovations Podcast. Welcome to the Human Capital Innovations Podcast. In this HCI podcast episode, I talk with Ambrose Blowfield about aligning core values with the way you operate your business. Ambrose Blowfield, welcome to the Human Capital Innovations Podcast.
Thank you so much, Jonathan. It's a privilege to be with you.
Yeah, I'm super excited to have a nice conversation. And thank you so much for waking up in the wee hours of the morning. You're joining us from Auckland, New Zealand, and I'm here in Utah in the U.S. I love New Zealand. We were talking a little bit about this in the pre-interview. I've been there a handful of times, and it's just such a beautiful place. Both islands are enchanting, and I just have loved my time there. So I'm a little bit jealous that you are there. And I have to say, we're 18 months into this pandemic, and New Zealand's kind of the poster child for like handling things well in terms of the impacts of everything related to COVID.
It is, Jonathan, certainly in certain areas. Thank you for saying the word we, meaning small, because that's the language that New Zealanders use. So clearly you have visited this beautiful place. We had some really good political leadership in the early days to realize we're a bunch of islands in the South Pacific. If we lock down our borders early and if we quarantine everybody coming in and we only have residents and citizens coming home, we can limit the spread of COVID. So in 18 months, we've had something either 27 or 28 deaths total.
Just right here in Utah, and we're not like a terribly populous state. We're I don't know, maybe 2 million people, 1.5 million, 2 million people in the state of Utah. And we just continue to have really high levels of hospitalizations, and the death toll continues to rise. So it's a sad thing. I think in the U.S. we haven't handled things very well.
Yeah, it's interesting, and maybe we'll get to this as well. It was a good demonstration of really clear leadership by our Prime Minister 18 months ago. And I think this is one key lesson I've shared with my clients around the world, is that she did explain why she was locking us down. And so it was really, really simple. As you know from New Zealand culture, family is really at the heart of a lot of the culture of New Zealand. Everything's about family. And part of that is respecting the elders. And that particularly comes from the indigenous population, the New Zealand Māori, where they have a principle of it takes a village to raise a child. So similar to a lot of European countries around the Mediterranean, or a lot of Hispanic countries, actually, in Far East countries, where 3 generations work closely together. She said to us all, I need the whole team of 5 million to get together on this. And we're doing it to protect our elders. And so that's your old school teacher, your old school principal. That's your grandparent down the street. It's the old neighbor you wave to. That's who you're protecting by staying home. And New Zealanders then get on board with that because we're very culture driven in this nation, very values based. And people understand family. We understand the importance of the 3rd generation. So it was partly driven through respect of elders that people stayed home when we were locked down.
Well, yeah, that's really great context. And it does actually feed well into the topic of our conversation today. We're going to be focusing on aligning core values with the way we operate our business. And certainly I think that's manifest in, the political realm in New Zealand in terms of dealing with COVID, as you just mentioned. As we get started, I just wanted to share Ambrose's bio with everybody. Ambrose Blowfield is one of Australia's leading trainers and speakers in sales, marketing, and business growth. He has both top-class academic and experience-based knowledge from working at many leading international companies. Having completed the highest rated bilingual business degree in the UK, he was one of only 15 applicants chosen from over 3,000 to join Procter & Gamble UK on their prestigious graduate program. He then worked for Australia's leading recruitment company, where he achieved double the average sales growth for his team. He then joined the world's leading financial recruitment firm, Robert Half International, after a 2-year contract in business development for New Zealand's leading engineering consortium, where he brought in over 100 million in project sales opportunities from scratch. Ambrose then joined his wife, Jo, in 2005 at the marketing company, where he found his true calling in helping businesses grow. Now dedicates most of his time to its sister company, the Sales Mastery Company, the focus being on developing world-class business-to-business salespeople and sales managers. Ambrose has delivered training in person in 10 different countries, while his online training has helped over 15,000 businesses in 20 countries across 6 continents, making over $2 billion in additional sales. Ambrose is a dynamic, passionate, and professional trainer and speaker whose energy is contagious. Giving is one of his core values, which has seen him active with the christmasbox.co.nz, a local soup kitchen, and helping over 1,500 businesses worldwide for free, helping them adapt to the changes brought about through COVID-19. Thanks again so much for joining us. It's just a pleasure to have you. Anything else you would like to add by way of background or personal context before we launch on into the conversation?
No, thank you, Jonathan. I always get embarrassed when people read out all aspects of my bio because I've adopted the Kiwi culture of humility. So I find it very difficult to hear someone talk about me in that way.
Oh, well, I appreciate the humility, but it's also a tremendous background, and I appreciate you sharing your expertise with us today.
Absolutely.
So, as I framed in the outset, we're going to be talking about aligning core values. Now, one of your core values is giving. And so at the tail end of your bio, there's a little bit about that. Why don't you tell us a little bit more about some of those core values that you have, and then how those have translated into how you've run the businesses you've been involved with. And then we can zoom out and talk more generally about how leaders can approach doing that within their own organizations.
Absolutely. Perfect structure. I love that, Jonathan. And values is something I'm incredibly obsessed of. If I may, I'm going to talk about it in 3 ways. I guess my first exposure to core values. Then I'll talk about how my wife and I, she started this business we now run in 2004. I joined her in 2005. I'll talk about how we used core values in those early days. And then I'll talk about how we've evolved core values now that, coming up to 20 years of working with them. So my first exposure to core values was actually being recruited by Procter & Gamble, obviously out of Cincinnati, Ohio, global best company in the world for consumer goods. At the time, just behind Rubbermaid, they were the second most respected company on the planet. And I had a friend whose father worked for them in Europe. I actually was raised in Switzerland, in Geneva, where the United Nations is and the World Health Organization. And,
can I just interrupt for a second?
Cool.
Because man, you're just making me even more jealous. Geneva is also such a beautiful and fascinating place.
It is a beautiful place. Yes, absolutely. And then of course, you'll get me more upset when I tell you that my international business degree had me for 3 years in the UK, but 1 year in Grenoble in France, in amongst the Alps. So I had to suffer my way through 38 days of skiing, while also completing 100% in French, a French business school. And then I know you've traveled, Jonathan. I then, having quit Procter & Gamble, I did have to live in Sydney for 4 years while the Olympics was going on, fell in love with my now wife, and we lived this incredible life. So I won't mention the 42 or 44 countries I've visited. That's for another discussion, Jonathan.
How fun.
Look, and to me, and funnily enough, that is one of my core values, if they're having fun. So let's talk about it. My exposure to Procter & Gamble, what blew me away, because people like Mars, Nestle, Procter & Gamble, Unilever, Johnson & Johnson, they used to do what was referred to as the milk round. They'd go to major cities in the UK and Europe. They'd put on a presentation. And if you're a soon-to-be university graduate, you'd attend these talks. And for a couple of hours, they'd tell you how marvelous they were. Procter & Gamble stood up and said, it's all about the people. And then they proceeded to demonstrate that by talking about the training and the coaching and the investment they made in their people, not the wages. Now, I won't speak about the others that I listened to, but one of them that makes pet food and and owns Wrigley's chewing gum and Mars bars, to keep it really, really simple. Those people stood up and they said, we're all about the money. You'll join us, we'll pay you more money than anybody else, and how dare anyone else pay you more than us? In fact, if you bring us a job offer elsewhere, we will beat it. It almost sounded like a hardware store doing some sort of infomercial. And that doesn't appeal to me. To me, the people side and the people development, and that obviously I've built a business on that for nearly 20 years now, is developing people. And they had 7 core values. Now, I'm not going to read them out now because I've been gone 20 years from P&G, but the fact remains is those core values were the basis on which they recruited us. For example, we wanted to have people who could problem solve, what we now call in business critical thinking. So at the interview stage, they would ask you a competency-based question to see, could you align to their values in problem solving? They would say, Ambrose, tell me of a time when you had to solve a problem. And I might have talked about I remember backpacking through Europe when I was 17, and then my cousin and I got stuck, and we did this to overcome the problem with no money. And they went, great, so he can solve a problem. Right, tell me another time you've had an example. Oh, well, I remember studying in France for a year, and this came up, and this is what we did to solve the problem because we did the project for Renault motor vehicles. Oh, yeah, cool, got it. What else? And so what they were using the core values for was to say, if you're not aligned to these core values, you don't even join us. Now, that's something I've taken with me because a lot of our clients are more small to medium-sized businesses. So I often get to work with the business owner. And when they say to me, what's your number one principle around recruitment? And I go, don't hire anyone who's not going to be aligned to core values, because 2 outcomes are the only ones that will happen long-term. Either they will self-select out of your team and business, or you'll kick them out. And as I've said to people over many years, and as you mentioned, I've trained about 15,000 businesses now, it hasn't ever not been the case. If someone comes in who is not aligned to the core values, or someone who you inherit in your team doesn't align to those core values, you're not going to promote them because they don't exhibit the right behaviors. They will cut corners, and either they'll jump out or you'll kick them out. And it's absolutely non-negotiable. So, so that's, I guess, my exposure. Go ahead.
Can we just, maybe it's implicit in what you're saying, but to make it really explicit, that is really harmful to organizations when you bring people in that don't fit with the core values. Now, whether you kick them out or they self-select out, regardless, that turnover is incredibly costly. It has negative impacts on the team dynamics and the productivity and the innovation of the organization. And so it's very smart that they took that approach in terms of hiring towards core values. And they saw perhaps sooner than was kind of typical. And nowadays, I think more people get the core values issue, whether or not they actually put it into practice or not. But Procter and Gamble kind of let out, right? In terms of really making that a key point.
Mid-90s, right? So, I was exposed to them in the mid-90s because I'm old. For them to have had it so ingrained into it suggests that they had it in place for a decade or 2 before that. So I'm guessing that P&G, I could confidently say, by about the 80s, they'd kind of nailed it. Now, at that stage, keep in mind, they were by the mid-80s, they were probably 130, 140 years old. So they'd learned their lessons. They were already in 190 countries. So they'd certainly developed over time, a little bit like your podcast is in over 100 countries. They'd done good and lived by that. And I guess they'd played around with it. The thing that I thought was amazing was when you did quarterly progress reviews or quarterly performance reviews with your manager and their manager, the nature of the structure of those was also aligned to the same 7 core values. So it was the case of you couldn't get in without them, but you couldn't stay without them because they wouldn't sit down and go, what's your knowledge? What's your GPS score? How many degrees have you got? That was to get through the door, to have a degree to get through the door. But the case was, we'll teach you what you need to know. We'll give you the skills, which they did. We'll give you the knowledge but ultimately you need to bring your attitude and who you are as a person. And then we can shape you into what we need to shape you into. And I trusted that until my best friend moved to Sydney, or was about to move to Sydney, Australia via Auckland. And I thought, you know what? I've just got to go and live in Australasia. I'd fall in love with people in this part of the world and the pace of life. So I aligned to my core values around fun and I've spent 20 years living in a place that's really fun.
I'm excited to announce the publication of my new book from HCI Press, Bluer Than Indigo Leadership. the journey of becoming a truly remarkable leader. Early in my adult life, I learned about an Asian proverb that translates as bluer than indigo. If you think about the color indigo, it is a brilliant, deep, and vibrant blue, what some would call the bluest of blues. To have something that is bluer than indigo is rare and truly remarkable. Contrary to popular myth, there is no one-size-fits-all or cookie-cutter approach to effective leadership. There's no silver bullet, no secret sauce, no go-to model that will solve all of our problems. The truth is, great leaders have all had their unique strengths and flaws, and have all had to discover and then pave their own distinctive path in their life's journey to fulfill their leadership potential. Bluer than indigo leadership will help you discover your own path and explore those ordinary, everyday actions that will help you respond to an uncertain future and produce extraordinary results for individuals, teams, and organizations. Yeah, well, I really love that. I mean, there's so much there that's just so important. One, you figured out for yourself what your core values were. I think that's super important. So having values alignment and value congruence between individuals and the organizations they're working for is really essential to having really dynamic teams and effective organizations that consistently, sustainably bring value to the marketplace. And so everything you just described, I think, really articulates that quite well. The P&G example of how they hired for core values also is really just a really prime example. We need to be able to do that more and more within our organizations. That will save us all sorts of heartache and trouble in terms of how we're leading. And it does mean we have to invest a little bit more upfront into the process, right? Definitely. Because assessing values and value alignment, values congruence is not super simple.
No.
You can ask some questions that kind of get at it, but you also have to dig a little deeper. So maybe you could talk a little bit about how they went about doing that and how you've done that in some of the organizations you've been associated with.
Yeah, great question, Jonathan. For me, this is actually something we teach in a sales manager program we've got. Whereas I say to people, it's just non-negotiable. If the person's not going to be aligned to core values, don't even waste the time. Even if they come with a little black book of amazing contacts that are going to help them grow, eventually you're going to clash. So I guess what I've observed and what I've used over the years is that at the interview stage, you can ask competency-based questions to find out, does this person live these behaviors? That's what you're trying to get to. We talk about core values, we're saying, does this person live by these principles of behaviors? Not what do they think? The problem about most interview questions is someone will say, this is our market, this is our business, what do you think about it? Or what would you do when you're here? And all you're testing is their cognitive cleverness, their thinking. And most people, if they're well-educated or well-researched, they can kind of get away and give you a great answer. Now, most of the times, they can live to those answers, but some of the time they can't. As you said, Jonathan, if you were to lose somebody, hire someone who is wrong, the cost to the business is going to be somewhere in between 100,000 in direct costs, even if you let them go after a few months, and then probably past $1 million in indirect costs. The opportunity cost of not hiring the right person, the undermining of the culture of the team, the motivation of those around them. If you hire a wrong person, it's going to cost you $1 million, particularly if you're a larger corporate, in indirect costs, minimum. And that's most of the statistics. They talk about that. But again, ask the questions around when you've exhibited behavior. For us, it's giving. So what we would ask in our company is, even if they're a subcontractor, and I want to stress that, even if they're not a fully paid employee, if they're a subcontractor to us, we would ask them, so giving, we want us to exhibit. So you're not going to say giving is a core value, tell me when you give, because that's obvious. What I would say is, tell me how you spend your time. Or tell me who's been a mentor in your life. We teach. So if this person doesn't understand that they've had a mentor or a great coach, then they don't understand the principle of learning. And we think we need to continuously, develop ourselves and our clients. So we'd ask them, tell me how you spend your time. Tell me a way that you've given back to your alma mater. Tell me when you've given back to your family, to your friends. Tell me what role you play. You've mentioned you've got 3 younger siblings. Tell me what role you play in their life. And by listening to their story, you'll start to realize, has this person got a giving servitude nature? Obviously Bible people talking about sort of a service-based leader or a servitude-based leader. Is that what you're looking for? And if it is, you'll hear it in what they're saying. But if they go, well, it's all about me and I lead from the front and I lead by example, if that suits your company, which I suspect the Mars Corporation, in the mid-90s, it would have suited them, then you should go down that pathway for your career. So that would be the key for me, Jonathan, at the interview stage. The other one, and I will throw this in, and I worked in recruitment, as you said, in Sydney, Australia. A very common step that a good recruiter will do is in-depth reference checking. They will speak to the people that worked with them day in, day out for 50 hours a week. What I see is a lot of large corporates, they will outsource to someone like Robert Half International or Hayes Recruitment, and they'll say, you do the reference checks. But the person that you're asking to do the reference checks has a vested interest in placing the job because they get $20,000 or whatever it is for the payment. Of course, the reference check comes back good. But if that person works for you, it's your responsibility, even if the reference checks were done before you, because you need to ask these questions. Out of interest, let's take Jonathan, right? How does Jonathan perform under pressure? And they'll say, oh, he's really good. He thrives on it. And so how does he really perform? Or what's Jonathan like on a bad day? Or who does Jonathan clash with and why? And then you'll hear the truth. And it's not that you're trying to catch this person out. You just want to hear the truth and go, I can help that person join my team, or they don't belong in my team. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. And just to highlight that, it's better for everybody to figure this out early, right?
100%.
Now, me as the applicant, I may not feel that way if I don't get selected due to incongruence of values, but ultimately in the long run, it will be better for me because I'll be free. I'm still a free agent. I can go and I can find an organization I align better with where I'm going to succeed. I'll have a better chance of having success, being fulfilled. And ultimately, I can live a more fulfilled, happy life and have a more productive career if I'm aligned with the organization I'm working with. So it's better for me as the applicant. It's certainly better for the organization. And really, we're doing people a favor when we are clear-eyed about these core values and what we want to put forward as kind of our foundational approach to how we do business.
Definitely, Jonathan. I'm pleased you picked up on that. I think a lot of managers, they want to do good. They want to be ethical. They want to be fair to everybody. Well, not everyone's going to be fair to your company. Those that are not aligned to your core values will not be fair in return. I think there's also a human need, particularly for managers and leaders who are raised in a household with a lot of strong values. They would think, oh, I'm going to do them good. I could really help them. If they join our team, I could really help them. Or worse still, we can fix them. If we take this bad person who's got values of cutting corners or being unethical, if they're part of our moral and ethical team, that'll fix them. Well, you know what? If you want to fix somebody, go volunteer at the soup kitchen, go help out, go help kids on the street corner who maybe not have had the privileges that you've had. There's so many ways you can help the world, but do not run your business and your team like a charity. Be profitable, give to charities, sponsor charities, volunteer to charities, but don't run your team like it.
Yeah, well said. And just bringing it back to what you were saying earlier, I mean, you do. This is something that is being said from someone who has giving as a core value, who has servant leadership as a core value. So you're not just like some harsh, soulless, heartless capitalist.
I'm the opposite. Absolutely. I mean, in as you said before, what I'm most proud of in the 17 years of us owning and running this business together, because even before I joined my wife full time, I was obviously doing extra work in the setup year of that. For us, what I'm most proud of in the 17 years is the times we've given back. We had a deadly earthquake in Christchurch, New Zealand in 2011, where we lost 160 lives. And that's a lot for a country of 5 million. And my wife used to live in Christchurch. She had friends whose sort of houses were flooded and wrecked and everything else. And we put together a concert 5 weeks later in our province of Taranaki, New Zealand, to raise money for Christchurch. It was the main fundraiser. That's probably my most proud moment in business, was that we had time and the skills to do that. When COVID hit, we lost 65% of our income because no longer could I travel 100 nights a year away from New Zealand. And a third of our business is online training and coaching. So we had enough to keep going, but a third of income versus, the other 2/3 we lost overnight tested us. But last year, our goal was, let's work out what minimum money do we need as a family to get through our year. And then essentially how many businesses can we help for free? The number we hit was 1,500. And our church was fundraising as well. And we said, well, the rest of our money we'll give to the church, because the church was trying to have 20 million New Zealand dollars. So that's about 15 million US of impact into the community of Australia, New Zealand, South Pacific starting this year. So they needed to pay down their debt so they could start giving away 15 million a year. And we believed in that cause, and we know that they can do a great job with soup kitchens and other things to do that. And so last year, even losing 2/3 of our income, we went back as a family, sat down our kids and went, kids, we've got skills. We can help people who can't afford help, to help them regrow their businesses so they can feed their families. We know how much we need to live, and we know what our church needs to raise. So if we just do those three things, and that was 9 months last year, it was one of the most enjoyable years with the least money in our bank account we've ever had.
Yeah, and it really does highlight, what can bring the most joy and satisfaction in life, and stuff and things and money really isn't it. I mean, people need enough to survive, to meet their basic needs, to keep, shelter and food, and, do those things. And that's super important. And that's, it sounds like one of the reasons why your family was focusing the way it was on giving back, even while you were in a time of need yourself. So that's tremendous. And again, all of this then feeds into how, hopefully we're running our businesses. Now, I'm not going to sit here and tell anyone else who's listening on what those core values need to be for you, but you need to stop and think and reflect and have conversations with your team about, what those core values are. If you already have some identified, are you living up to them? If you don't have any identified, what should they be, and what really gets at the heart of what you as an organization are doing and trying to accomplish. It's really important as a foundational component to any successful business that you are clearly articulate those core values, and then you find ways to really embed those elements throughout the organization, just like you were talking at P&G. So vitally important. And then once you do that, then you're in a position to make it part of the hiring process, the process of performance reviews and giving people promotions, and within a matter of just not too long a time, in a matter of a few years, you can start to see pretty tremendous cultural change within your organization as the organization comes into alignment with those core values.
That's 100% right. That's a really great summary, Jonathan. I wish we had a lecturer like you at university. Of the 4 years I spent at university, no one ever summarized organizational behavior and core values like you just did. That would have saved me probably 3 years of the 4, to be honest. So I take my hat off to you. That's a brilliant summary. I guess I would also comment, if I may, you can have organizational core values. So if you're a large corporation with, say, 1,000 or more workers, you can have organizational core values. And then your team can have adapted core values for your team. I spend my time mostly coaching sales directors and sales managers and salespeople. And obviously those people are quite vibrant, pretty results driven. So, they could develop or evolve their own sort of team core values. Now, the key thing I want to stress is you can have your team have subtly different core values, but they cannot clash with the corporate core values. Think of it like a big family. You can't have a cousin misbehave. So you cannot cut corners and clash, but you can have subtly team ones. Because often what I get is I talk to, say, a sales manager. They might have 10 or 20 salespeople, and they go, oh, look, our team are not motivated by the core company values. I wish we could have our own. It's like, you can. Get your team to buy into them, clearly define them, talk about what is right behavior and wrong behavior to those values, but you cannot clash with the mothership. You can't clash with the corporate whole. If they complement, you can have your own ones for your team.
Yeah, well said. Well, Ambrose, it has been a real pleasure. I'm noting the time, which has just flown by. I need to let you go and get on with your busy day. But I really appreciate all the insights, the wisdom that you shared. And before we close today, I wanted to give you a chance to share with listeners how they can get connected with you, find out more about your work, your organization, your team, and then give us the final word on the topic for today.
Awesome. Thank you, Jonathan. And again, it's been an absolute privilege. I'd have happily sat here and listened to you, to be honest. So thank you so much. If they can spell the name Ambrose, which is A-M-B, then Rose like the flower, and then Blowfield, which is as in the wind blows and in the field like you run through. They can find me on LinkedIn. Alternatively, my main business is salesmasterycompany.com. And if people go into the free stuff, so if you go to salesmastery.com into the free stuff, there's some downloadable tools there for leadership. And I'm inspired by this, and given that giving is a core value, what I'm going to do, Jonathan, is I'll create a free tool in there about values and how you can actually create a short list and discuss it with your team. So I'll create a download there for people to get access to it. And in that way, we can give away and help people grow and be great leaders and great managers and build great prosperity around the world.
Wonderful. Beautiful. Thank you so much, Ambrose. It has been a pleasure. I appreciate everything that you shared. I encourage listeners to reach out, to get connected, find out more about what Ambrose and his team can do for you. And as always, I hope everyone can stay healthy and safe, that you can find meaning and purpose at work each and every day. And I hope you all have a great week. The alchemy of truly remarkable leadership. Ordinary, everyday actions that produce extraordinary results. Consider how the nature of work has shifted over the past 50 years. With increased globalization, rapid technological advancement, and the shift in economic composition, the average job of today looks very different than the average job of 50 years ago. What will the jobs and organizations of tomorrow look like? Moreover, what does this all mean for organizational leaders? What are the core competencies and capabilities of organizations and their leadership that are prepared for continued disruption and geopolitical and socioeconomic shifts? Regardless of what the future holds, increasingly, leaders need to be socially minded, data-driven, decisive, champions of talent, and disruptors of the traditional notions of leadership, teams, organizations, and work. The alchemy of truly remarkable leadership will help you to explore your own leadership competencies and capabilities and consider ways to apply and implement them into your workplace and personal life. Check out Human Capital Innovations magazine, Human Capital Leadership. Human Capital Leadership is a free, interactive e-magazine with the mission to help individuals, leaders, and organizations find innovative approaches to maximize their human capital potential. We publish issues quarterly in August, November, February, and May. Take a look at the latest issue and let us know what you think. Thanks again for joining us for this episode of the Human Capital Innovations Podcast. I hope you stay healthy and safe and that you have a great week. Check out our new weekly LinkedIn newsletter, Alchemizing Human Capital, exploring industry trends via original research and interviews with executives and thought leaders from across the globe. We look forward to having you join us.